Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about the state of the Commanders' offensive line. They're going to have 3 new starters up there, folks. What's it going to look like? Don't know yet. And we're not going to know for a while. There's your answer. But the story's up on ESPN.com. Some interesting comments in there. So give it a read. Also, for you gold members, don't forget, June 13th, 7:00 Eastern time, private Zoom session with Logan Paulson. Bring your questions. If you want to become a gold member, go to the Ampire Media YouTube page, see the word join, and then click on there. And if you want to become a gold member, great. Always appreciate it. If you want to become a member, great. Always appreciate it. If you just want to listen to this, still appreciate it. Anyways, June 13th, that's this Thursday, 7:00 Eastern time with Logan Paulson on a private Zoom. So in a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by wide receivers coach Bobby Engram. Now, for everybody who wants the video, guess what, folks? I got some video for you. So we had a little session last week with all the assistant coaches in the cafeteria at Commander's facility. And so, my theory on all this, right? With doing these interviews, there's some times where they have to be conducive to using the camera. And here I was able to kind of put the camera, kind of set it in front of me, get the view of the coach. You hear me asking questions, and it's okay. There are some times where it's like we did one in the wintertime where it wasn't conducive to that, the way it was set up. You're basically standing in front of them versus sitting next to them. So it makes a big difference. When I had the Bobby Wagner interview, I was sitting next to him on a bench, nowhere to put the camera except you're holding up his face. When you're holding up somebody's face, you're going to get an interview, but it's not going to be the kinds you really want because guys are just better. People are just better when they don't have a camera pointing in their face. They just are. So anyways, but here was able to get it. So get all that. In fact, you're going to get a little appearance by Mitch Tischler here at the end in this video too. My pal Mitch. I'm sure you guys know Mitch very well. Anyway, so stay tuned for that. It's about 5 minutes long, and I do get into a few of the receivers, and I wish some of these could go longer, but sometimes, you've got to get one guy, and we get about 45 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer with going around to these different assistants. So I'm going to be playing some of these throughout the next several weeks, next month or so. And, so I have video on all of them, different lengths on each, because some guys I need to talk to them more than others because the kind of stories I'm writing for ESPN.com. And then, but with Engram, I want to get some on Jahan Dotson, some on a couple of the other ones, just some quick thoughts from Engram on some stuff. I will have interviews later with some of the other coaches. So anyways, but I want to start off playing the receivers one, because one of the guys I think that is very important here this season and going forward, if he can have a big year, is Jahan Dotson. And he was a guy that I thought was going to really ascend last year. And, it's not like he was horrible. He had 49 catches. It's just that he didn't make the kind of impact that I thought he would for a variety of reasons. And I'm not, there are a lot of reasons that go into all this, whether it's his own development, whether it's how you're used, whether it's, sometimes the quarterback play or not getting enough time to get guys open, whatever it is, still wasn't the impact. And eventually, it's the players that are the ones that are ultimately held accountable. Terry McLaurin still had all that same situation and still finds a way to get over 1,000 yards. So, but Jahan to me can still be a good receiver in the NFL. And I think he's more capable of more than what he did last year. I think he is, and he knows that too. I'll say that. I think he's the first to that who would agree with that. And he has seemed like a guy with a little bit of extra, I guess, pep in his step, maybe for lack of a better phrase, because of some of these changes and just a fresh start for him. But it also comes down to him. So, but I want to focus on him because we know who Terry McLaurin is at this point. He's going to get over 1,000 yards, right? He's going to work on stuff in the offseason that he always kind of goes in the offseason with a plan to work on something in the coming, in that offseason to make him better. And whether it's yards after the catch, being better at contested catches, whatever it is, or just getting off the line of scrimmage. Every year he goes in the offseason trying to do that. And it's why he's been able to maintain a certain level of play in the NFL. And it's something that's worth emulating for anybody who's in that room. Dyami Brown, obviously he's going to be a guy that people look at. Can he finally have that big year? Well, I'll say this. I think I'm not going to sit here and tell you he is, because I don't know. Last year, I was told by coaches that, oh, hey, this system is perfect for him. It's really going to benefit him. And they were excited about him, and didn't really result in anything. And so, not to the level of where he was drafted, certainly. So is he going to have that year? I don't know. And I'm not going to even predict that, because I haven't seen proof of that in the spring practices. I mean, you see a catch here and there, you see a drop, saw a couple of drops last week. So, I'm not going to make any prediction for what Dyami Brown might do. What I do know is that he can help in the block as a blocker, as a receiver. And I do think that's going to be a slightly bigger emphasis for this group overall. This is not something I got into with Engram as well, but my own 2 cents is this group as a group needs to be better as blockers. And that includes Terry McLaurin. I think he's been a little bit more inconsistent in that than I think that they would like. And I think that's where Dyami does a nice job, but you got to still be able to get open and catch the ball. So don't know what to expect from him there. Luke McCaffrey, let's wait and see what happens in training camp. He's made a couple plays when we've been out there, but it's not like he's just tearing things up either. So I don't want to sit there and go overboard about what he might do, because another guy I don't know. And what I do know is he has some versatility. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. And I think they'll tap into that versatility for all these guys. And I think same thing with Jahan. I'll get to that in a minute. But I think with McCaffrey, that'll be something certainly worth watching. And then, of course, there's also Olamide Zaccheaus, who, again, wait and see on that one too, because, he a good year a couple of years ago with Atlanta, not so much last year. So, but we'll see what happens with him. Can he add something? Sure. But I think this is the other thing to note, is that I do think this is why you needed to get another tight end in here who can help, and Ben Sinnott to go with Zach Ertz and John Bates. And then for them, hopefully they see an Armani Rogers develop and maybe ascend past a Cole Turner, whatever, because they're going to use a lot of 2 tight end sets. But again, when going back to the receivers, I think there's a wait and see on some others, but we know Dotson was drafted here in the first round by a different group, but he's a guy that has the ability to make more plays than what he showed last year. And so that's why I wanted to get into with him. And one of the things that, it's funny, because one of the things, and I asked Engram about this, but one of the things we saw early in training or in the OTA workouts was there was a day where he made a nice catch, got past, I think it was Mike Davis. But he did a good job separating too, in tight coverage, getting at the top of the route, and a nice ball by Jaden Daniels, a nice dime, a nice catch by Dotson. But Terry McLaurin was pumped up after that play. And I relayed this after that practice, very pumped up. And basically was because of how Jahan used his hands at the line of scrimmage. And he said, if you use your hands like that, they can't stop you. You use your hand like that at the line, they can't stop you. And that's important, because that's the number one thing I think people would say he has to work on. In fact, I talked to someone in the league who very familiar with his game, and asked him about Jahan Dotson. And he said he wasn't sure what happened last year. A lot, as I said, a lot goes into it, but he's a smaller receiver. So what happened last year is that they pressed him. He didn't have a plan on how to get off of press. He's not strong enough or big enough. That's not a coaching point. He's just not strong, has to develop in some of those areas. So when he sees press, he's not taken out of games. So that's a sentiment that I think rings true. And when you watch him last year, I went back and watched a lot of his coverages against man coverage. And, there were definitely a lot of press. It wasn't like it was always jamming him at the line of scrimmage, but they are up. And when they are up, you're going to have to contend with their hands at some point, which means you've got to use your hands at some point too. So you notice that a lot. Like when it was press coverage, it's not going to be quite as good as when they're off, or certainly against zone coverage. And again, it goes back to the hands. And I think that's one of the things that he's worked on. And we're working with a strength guy in the off season and part of that had to be it should have been, we're going to talk to him more about this at some point, but should have been more with the hands, right? Because that is the way he can get off the line of scrimmage and way you win. Because when he beats you at the line, he can be really good, right? If you get your hands off you, he can be really good. But there were a number of plays last year when you go back and watch some of his coverages against man coverage where, it becomes a contested situation. He might get your hands on you, but he's not creating any sort of separation when it comes to the hand fighting or when someone puts their hands on him, he's not able to get them off him as well. And it negates what he can do. When he's able to, so it really came down to, can he get you with his feet, with his head, with his eyes, whatever, but he wasn't going to win with his hands. And I think that's something that has to improve this year. And I think he knows that. And again, Engram certainly knows that too. So you would see, like against the Giants, for example, there was one play where he's on the left side, the corner presses him at the line, can't get him off him, corner gets into his inside hip, and almost picks off a Sam Howell pass because Dotson was unable to create any separation because he just couldn't get him off of him. There was another play against the Eagles, press, jam, can't get the guy's hands off of him. So again, it wasn't like he was being jammed every play in press coverage, but when you are playing press or when it becomes a hands situation, he's got to be stronger with that to create. There were a couple other plays in the end zone against the Giants. I think it was the Giants or one of those teams, but where a little bit of a slot fade and just not able to create any separation. The defense back, you get your hands on them, can't, create anything off of that. And that's why McLaurin was so pumped to see what he did in practice that week. And, so I think that's a good thing. Now, the other thing is too, one of the things he does well, and I'd be curious to see how they use him. And Engram talked about how they're going to, and you'll hear him, but how they'll use him in a wider variety of spots. So when you saw like last year, some of his successes you motion to a stack formation. When you motion to stack, now you're also preventing them from really kind of playing the kind of press that they would want to get their hands on you, even at 5 yards, because now you're going to play off and stagger a little bit. And what would happen is a couple of times you'd see where like the receiver up front, whether it's McLaurin or Curtis Samuel, would release right at his guy, and you're kind of taking him out, but it freezes the defensive back, but also then gives Jahan a chance to hesitate, kind of use his footwork to set him up. And that's when he does a really good job of creating that separation and causing some confusion in the defensive back. That's when was really good. And you definitely saw that as well. So I think that's something that, you'd like to see a little bit more of this year and how they do it. And he said Dotson told us earlier that he was looking forward to becoming more of a route runner. And I asked Engram about that as well. And, it's funny because you go back and look at the usage for how he was used last year, even compared to his rookie year. Last year, he was in the left slot 129 times, but and then the right slot 121 times. The two most areas he was at, wide left, 185, wide right, 161. As a rookie, it was slot left, 43, slot right, 50, wide right, 157, wide left, 98. So it seemed like he was running routes from in the slot a lot more last year per game than he was. And he played 17 games last year, only 12 as a rookie, but per game was averaging more. The difference in his game last year too, though, he was not being targeted as much down as a vertical receiving threat. And so now, as a rookie, his number one play where he gained the biggest yards, where he had the most targets and the most routes run, were on the vertical routes. And he was caught 9 passes for 237 yards on those routes. There was 49 routes, 21 targets. So that was something that last year he was targeted 17 times on those routes, again, compared to 40 or 21 the year before in fewer games. only caught 6 passes off that for $131. So still average over 20 yards a catch, but it was his yards after the catch were down. And that's something they're going to have to get that guy, because he can do damage after the catch. And it actually got worse. And part of it was, some of the routes he was running, a lot of short outside routes. That was his number one route last year. And he's not getting yards after the catch. In fact, so let's look at some other numbers here real quick. His yards after the catch as a rookie, there's basically, you're running routes from, from the slot left or right, outside right or left, and then tight left or right, right? So in 5 of those areas, he averaged over 3 yards after the catch per catch. Last year, there wasn't a single route where he averaged more than 2.7 yards after the catch. So it was really bad. And I think that's something they have to figure out. How can you get him more involved in that way? I do think, there's sometimes like some of those crossers, I think he does a really good job at that. When he can get you on, you get him on him, and a couple of times he does a really good job separating, because he's quick and he's quick and he has good speed too, in addition, but he can get you on him and then take you inside. You saw this, I think maybe it was against Giants, gets guy on him, takes him inside and turns to the outside. And then he cuts back to the middle and just creates space going across the field and gets like a 20-some yard catch. So there are a lot of things that guy does well as a route runner, right? And just being able to create that separation, but it's with the jukes, it's with the head, it's with the eyes. It's got to be doing it with the hands will create more opportunities for him. And the other thing is, I go back to those vertical throws, because for whatever reason last year, we didn't see as much. Now, there were times where I think they wanted Sam Howell to maybe trust the guys a little bit more down the field. We also know there were times he didn't have the time to do that. And, so I think that's part of it too. And if you're not getting open on there, then, and he and Dotson just missed on a couple of those throws down the field. But I also think like this is something that Jaden Daniels does very well. And that slot fade he throws very, very well. And that's where, if you can move Dotson around and get him out of those slots situations and get the ball, because there were a couple of times where on some of those slot fades, maybe the ball could have been, in a little bit better spot. There are also a couple other times where Dotson did not run the right route down the field. And that happened against the Bears. There was one, I think it was against the Bears, where it was a near pick by Howell, but it was actually a good throw. It's just that Dotson cut the route wrong at the end. So that's something that will have to change as well. But that's getting on the same page, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that was not a quarterback mistake. That's where Dotson has to be more consistent. But I do think that there's certainly I still think that kid can play. Now, I think there was some people who wondered, well, would he be good enough to pass Terry McLaurin? Well, I'm not going to go there. I think McLaurin does a really good job getting off at the line, and that's again, that's no pun intended, but it is a separator. And so Dotson, when you see that though, I think he can be highly effective in creating space for himself, and he creates space for himself, then he becomes a dangerous player. So that's why I say, I think we know what they have in Terry. We don't know what they're going to have in McCaffrey at all. We don't know, will De'Ami Brown actually finally ascend or not? And Zacchaeus, I think just how is he going to help him? But the guy who can make a big impact certainly is Dotson. And that's why I wanted to focus a little bit more on him. And I just, the other thing too, that I found interesting too, and just when you look at the targets that he had and the average air yards per target, for example, 2 years ago, when he was lined outside on the right side, the average air yards per target was like 17.2 yards. From that same spot last year, it was 10.2 yards. So that's a big difference in the emphasis when he's lined up outside. And that's where, so I think, does that cut down on your ability to gain yards after the catch, et cetera. So I think how they use him, you got to pay attention to that. It's not just about motioning and all that, but can you bounce him around a little bit more? And that seems to be the plan, but it wasn't like he was stationary last year either. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not as simple as saying, oh, it's a different this or that. I think there's some parts of his game that just had to improve. And keep in mind, he has the same receivers coach this year as he did last year. So, which is actually, to be honest, I think it's good because now Bobby Engram knew and knows what he had to work on. And that's always a big help too. So I still think the kid can play. I am curious to see what he does this year. And I do think he can be more of a threat down the field with Daniels as a quarterback. So we'll see. But anyways, enough of me. Don't forget, by the way, they will be out again at mini camps. Their scheduled practices for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm going to guess that the Thursday practice is canceled. They've had 100% attendance, which is remarkable for these OTA sessions. So it would be probably in the coach's best interest then to give the players the final day off. And so that's what I'm anticipating, but we don't know that for sure yet. So right now it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Chances are just Tuesday, Wednesday. I'll have reports after each of those practices. It's more underwear Olympics, but it still gives you a chance to start to see who's doing what and where, and always how Jaden Daniels looks. Anyways, enough from me. Here's my conversation with Washington Commanders receivers coach, Bobby Engram.
I think he was probably a little bit frustrated last year. You're not as productive as you want to be and all that. What have you seen from him coming in so far?
I think Jahan's consistent in his approach. And I like the fact that we've been able to move him around a little bit more in the offseason. But he's worked hard. He's in good shape. And I see quickness. The ball skills are there. And I see him working with intention to get better about every detail of his game.
Where do you see, what is any little things that have kind of jumped out so far in that area?
Yeah, releases.
Okay.
I
was going to ask you about that for sure.
I think his press releases, he's been a focus. He's put the work in. We still have work to do, but he's just figuring out, what's the next step for him and how does he get better? Because he knows if he's really good at the line, it's going to allow him to be more dominant down the field.
So there was a play he made a couple weeks ago where it was a ball from Jaden gets – I can't remember if it was Emmanuel or White Davis, one of those guys. Good coverage, but Terry was pumped up after the play because he said if you can use your hands like that at the line, they can't stop you.
Yep.
Is that kind of what you're talking about, using his hands better? Is that part of what it is? Or
yeah, that was a great example, and that's one where if he can make that play down the field, the releases allow him the opportunity to make that play. He has such great feet in terms of his quickness at the line of scrimmage, so certainly the emphasis has been on his hands, not forgetting about the feet, but not allowing guys to really kind of put their hands on him where they can be as physical as they want to be.
How does he get his hands out? Is it speeding up the hands? How do you improve with your hands at the line?
Just drills.
Anything in particular that he had to improve at with it, I guess?
No, just using them more consistently. I think he was gotten away with using his feet so much. I just think being mindful of using them.
Then what have you seen from Luke so
far? I really like Luke, man. Just his approach. He's all football, which we love. That's what we're about. A smart guy that grew up in a football family, so he kind of gets the ins and outs of the game. He's played multiple positions, so he sees the game a little different. But, physically, man, you like his size, you like his speed, you like the way he catches the football.
And with Terry, he always works on something every offseason. What is it, anything in particular that he was working on this year that you can see?
I gotta think back to exactly what that is. I don't want to give you a false answer right now.
That's right. But he's always doing something.
He's always doing something that we talked about. I'm just drawing a blank right now.
And going back to Jahan, one thing he said too is he's looking forward to being a route runner again. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you? Because that is obviously a strength of his game. So when he says that, what does it mean to you?
I don't know. What he means by it, my interpretation is not what he's saying.
Okay.
But I think having the opportunity to run more routes.
Okay.
I just think in general, like I said, we're moving them around a little bit more, being in a slot. There's different routes that are in the slot as opposed to outside. There's a lot of adjustments and variations that go on with your route game in the slot. So I think that's what he's alluding to, but you'd have to confirm that with Jahan.
And do you see Luke more inside, outside, both?
I see both, and I think the group itself and how we game plan will dictate where guys go. But he has the size and the speed to go outside. I think he has enough savvy and quickness to play in the slot, so I'm excited about seeing And we've been working them at both. We're cross-training them.
I'm sorry, Mitchell.
It's okay.
How does Jaden help this group? How can he help this group?
I mean, he's talented, right? Like, so anytime you got a guy that can distribute the ball the way he does, his accuracy, it gives the receivers, the backs, tight ends an opportunity to run after the catch. Obviously, in this league, extended plays are huge. You know, he's a very mobile guy that can move in the pocket and get rid of the ball. Once he breaks the pocket, he could be a problem, but he's looking to throw the ball first and not be a runner. You know, so I think he has a lot of tools that as he grows, we gotta be our best for him. But as he grows, he got a chance to be a really good player in this league.
What stood out to you so far that you've seen from him?
Composure and his approach. You know, just his composure as a young guy and his approach. You know, I like to see young guys that are very consistent and very methodical in their approach, and usually that bodes well for them in terms of the X's and O's and learning the playbook. And, you know, they have the talent physically to be here, but I think the faster they can grasp what we're asking them to do in the playbook and the more they can apply that, the better they can become quickly.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for Bobby and all the other assistant coaches for taking some time out to talk to us all last week. I'll be back with another episode on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. I'll talk to you next time.